Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. In the last part we started our journey here in Great Bay Temple, and now it's about time we get to the rest of this place. And I should have put a correction in the video after the fact, but I actually want to correct something from last time. We are not trying to save the old lady at the bomb thing at midnight of the first day. I'm thinking of the next 3-day cycle. Our only goal for the night of the first day is to actively make our way back to Ikana Graveyard and get something done there. So now we went across from the entrance room in the whirlpool room and found ourselves in this room, and our main goal here is to turn that switch to make water start flowing through all the green pipes in the dungeon. But we're not done here yet. There is a second floor to this area we need to get to in order to grab the chest you can see on screen. Getting there is technically a little easier to tell in Majora's Mask 3D due to the changes to the ice arrows. Still not the biggest fan of them. I get why, because admittedly the ice arrows as they are still kind of finicky, but there's something about needing them to be in forced locations that just felt worse to me. I can't quite phrase why, or parse why into words easily though. So now that the water flow is reversed, we can actively go through areas backwards, and this is actually the easiest way, besides using an arrow in the Great Fairy Mask, to get that stray fairy in a pot near the Dexy hands in the room where the boss key is. This room's interesting, though, in that it's a bit of an infamous one throughout the entirety of the history of Majora's Mask. You might remember I mentioned, more or less as soon as we got the Zora abilities, that more or less universally, all the water levels in Majora's Mask's Western release were raised up from their original Japanese height. That's true, but they also changed this room up. What we do here, we take the ice arrows, we freeze the water, and the platform stops perfectly. That didn't stop perfectly in the Japanese N64 release. You had to time it, and that just sounds like a nightmare. I'm glad they changed that, because then this probably would be my least favorite dungeon in the game, and probably one of my least favorite water dungeons in Zelda, period. Thankfully they changed that for the Western release, so we don't have to worry about that at all. There's even a couple of Zora jumps they changed in Majora's Mask 3D, that are kind of hit or miss for me. Again, the Zora in general I don't think really needed the changes it did for Majora's Mask 3D. And I guess I might as well go over those again for those who missed me talking about it in specific. While your 3-hit combo and dual boomerangs were unchanged in 3D, the big changes are in terms of Zora's swimming itself. For one thing, you actively do have a little bit of like a paddling swimming animation to theoretically make going through tight corridors easier. I don't think it really helps with that much. But the biggest thing is, in order to reach your fastest speed, you need to be using your electricity barrier, meaning you really can't swim fast reliably or very long without having magic. And I really don't think that was a necessary change. I guess technically it does make the Zora Link a little more in tune with Goron and Deku Link in that it has something that constantly can use magic that makes it more effective. Like with Zora, with the Deku Link, it's the snot bubbles. With Goron Link, it's the roll. It makes it more consistent with that. But that doesn't mean it's better, you know what I mean? Also, and I seldom ever encounter this, but if memory serves, like the Deku, Zora Link is weak to fire, and being hit with a fire attack like the Dynal Falls Fire Breath is counted as a void out. So you start the room over again, more or less. I can't even think of a single opportunity moving forward in the game where there's really a fire attack in a place where I would be Zora Link, but it's worth noting. Come down here, by the way, for this barrel, which you can swim into for a stray fairy. This is the closest thing this dungeon has to me to that one small key that's often overlooked in the Water Temple in Ocarina that's beneath the block that raises in the center column area. Because that's easily the key I've forgotten the most over the years in that room. In that dungeon period, even. Also, I put a fairy in a bottle before we entered the Great Bay Temple, you might have noticed. I don't really have a reason for doing that. I don't really need one, but it's good to have, if that makes sense. Just in case something goes wrong. So, our goal here in this room, we got little seesaws. There's frozen water over some of them, there's flowing water over some of them. Reversing the state of either of those makes these seesaws raise or lower depending on which one it is. And we need to use that to reach this up here to make the water continue to flow through the green pipes. What I find kind of interesting about the latter half of this dungeon structurally is usually with Zelda dungeons, you get your map and compass, then you go through a little bit, get the item, and then you use the item to get the boss key. And that's technically true in this dungeon as well as most of the ones in this particular game. But what I find interesting about this dungeon in specific is getting the boss key is more or less the halfway point of the dungeon. The latter half is dedicated to just putting water through the green pipes so you can actually reach the boss room. And there's something about that I find kind of cool. Also, if memory serves, I don't think any stray fairies had their location changed in the Great Bay Temple in Majora's Mask 3D. The biggest changes here are in the boss fight, and the boss fight of this dungeon definitely got some of the biggest changes in the 3DS release. I'd say it probably had the most overall, but definitely not the most drastic changes. I think the most drastic change goes to the boss of the 4th dungeon. But we'll talk more about that in several videos. For now, since the green pipes are flowing, we can now actively reach the room where the boss is and, you know, access the boss fight. But before we actually climb up into this room, there are 2 stray fairies we can get in here, one of which is right there. I think you might be able to hit that in a certain angle with the Zora boomerangs, don't quote me on that, but the other one is over here in this corner in that little passageway that leads out of the room. I think I actually forget to get it for a moment, but you do need to use Zora boomerangs to get that without having to leave this room again. Not that that's a big loss of time, but still worth noting. Similarly to that room in Woodfall Temple with the snappers that you need to fight only as Deku Link, I have distinct memories of being near the final 6 hours in this room, and I can't exactly tell why. I want to say it might be linked to me playing this game as a kid and being called away to dinner or to work on homework, and me just not pausing the game for some reason. Because usually in a lot of games I can just leave the game idling and not a problem would happen, but this is one of the few games where time is an active threat at all times, so whoops. Oh, also, very weird graphical thing for me. By and large, the transformation masks look really good in 3DS. Something about Zora Link in Majora's Mask 3D just feels soulless. I think it's the fact that Zora Link doesn't have active, like, white pupils. It has more, like, glazed over eyes, which is closer to the concept art for Zora Link, admittedly. But it just looks kind of weird, and I think there's even mods that make it closer to this N64 model visually. It's one of the few times where the visual improvements just feel like they actively take something away. There's not a lot of those in Majora's Mask in Ocarina of Time 3D, but there's a couple. Oh yeah, that's the thing. If you're underwater as any Link that can swim, like, actually that is just Hylian Link, I guess. If you're underwater too long, a timer pops up. That timer is dependent on the amount of hearts you have. I think it's 4 seconds for every heart or something like that. It's almost never a threat here in Majora's Mask 3D though, because there's not many times you can get underwater as Hylian Link. It really would just be like, hey, you were swimming and something weird happened and you clip beneath something, compared to, say, Ocarina of Time where maybe you do a weird dive and get caught on something, or you use the iron boots in an inopportune location without a certain tunic equipped. For now, though, it is time for the boss fight, who is one I dreaded as a kid, but nowadays I'd say is arguably one of the easiest in the game, at least in the N64 version. Zora Link, go down the hole. Enter Gyorg. Gyorg in the N64 version can be troublesome, but he's pretty easy to take out. When he's swimming around, you actively need to stun him with an arrow and then swim into him with the barrier active as Zora Link to do damage. He can do a couple different attacks. He can actively try to swallow you when you're in the water, which just does a lot of damage. Later in his health, he can spawn little babies that home in on you, and he can just do some jumps and slams onto the platform to try and knock you off into the water. In the 3DS version, though, this boss got a lot of revisions done. You're still on the platform for the first bit. When you shoot him with an arrow, an eye spawns out of him, and you need to shoot that to do damage for the first little bit, but eventually the platform sinks down, and you are Zora Link for the rest of the battle. He can still spawn like little babies in that, but what you need to do is knock little mines off of chains around the arena and have him suck them in, which will then stun him, and then you can Zora swim into the eye that's revealed at that point to do damage. I think that's definitely a more interesting fight. I think out of all of the Majora's Mask 3DS fights, this one's the one that needed the changes the most. Even though I do like how simple this fight is, especially considering how much it scared me as a kid because you giant, creepy underwater fish. 3DS definitely had a more interesting one here. This is the best boss changes out of the game. Which is funny to me that you go from a boss that had basically no changes to the best changes to, when we get to the boss in the next temple, the worst changes by and large. I also appreciate 3DS for this boss fight specifically, if only because it actually makes Gyorg's design make more sense. He's just weirdly fleshy and textured here in the N64 version. He had like a nice little metal mask look going on in 3DS. It was pretty cool. I also want to say he might just have less health than some of the other bosses, but that's also because we're dealing with Zora Link's barrier, which does do good damage to begin with. But if you somehow hit him with a weapon otherwise, you have just stronger weapons at this point. And plus you're not having to chase him down a lot, which also helps a pretty good bit. If you need health, there are pots around, but they don't give too much. If anything, they're probably better for getting arrows than anything. And if memory serves, this is the final hit. Goodbye! That's such a funny death animation to me. I can't exactly even parse why. It's just so absurdly silly compared to the way every other boss in this game dies. Be it crumbling, being crushed by blocks, or what happens in the next boss fight. For now, though, time for some more remains. We seized Gyorg's remains. You have just freed the innocent spirit that this dark mask had kept imprisoned within the body of evil Gyorg. Hey, listen! We want you to lend us your power. If you just leave things as they are, something terrible will happen to this world. Surely you're the only ones who can stop it. That's what Tail was trying to tell us. Help our friend. I get it. We have to help the last one. Then promise us this. You'll cooperate with us.
Now I can continue resting in peace. I too must abide the laws of ancient times and again merely watch from my deep slumber. But the evil that haunts this land has now completely vanished, Link. I shall depart after enjoying Lulu's voice a little bit longer. I think the gods can permit that.
I don't know why, I've always found it odd. There's not really a cutscene to the same extent as with Woodfall, Snowhead, or even the next area when you finish off Great Bay Temple. If anything, the biggest thing for that is now if we head back into Zora Hall, Lulu's in here, and she's clearly feeling a little bit better. So let's go see what she has to say. I think you can also talk to the other band members for more dialogue, but I never really do that because I forget to. Mikau, You came back safely. That's good. I was surprised when my voice turned that lonely island into a turtle. But that song you played for me, my mother used to sing it often, long ago. Those eggs were laid to remind me of that. That song was from when I was a very young child, so I'd forgotten it. I put you through some horrible experiences, Mikau. But I'm all better now. Well, the town's concert's very soon. Let's start a rehearsal.
1, 2, 3.
Consider that and the jam session we had with Japas a while back a little bit of foreshadowing. I love that song, though. I love that song so much. So now that Great Bay's weather problems have been cleared, that actually, not much changes here. If memory serves, there's exactly one minigame you can do that you couldn't before here. You get most of the stuff in Great Bay done, at least with how I tend to play the game, way before you do the temple. But we now have ourselves all 15 stray fairies, so we can now go access the Great Fairy for Great Bay and get our upgrade from here. With that said, this is arguably the most out of the way Great Fairy, because you actually have to either jump onto one of these islands or use the... what's it called? Hook shot, that's the word, to get from tree to tree. You do eventually need to use it no matter what, but you're also going to need some bombs, so hopefully you have at least one. I think if memory serves, on one of the little, like, rocky outcroppings here on this cliff, too, there's also either a chest or a hole you can find bomb chews in. But I'm going to be honest, I don't get bomb chews until the literal last area, because you get some for free there. Because you never need them in the game. Just like in Ocarina, technically. Oh no, you needed them like twice in Ocarina. Oh, courageous young one, I am the Great Fairy of Courage. Thank you for returning my broken and shattered body to normal. As thanks, I shall lend you my strength. Your defense has been strengthened. Enemies now deal half as much damage as they did before. Come see me whenever you're overcome by wariness. So, it does what it says on the tin. Our defense is now doubled. We might have 15 hearts, but now we have the damage equivalent, a defense equivalent of 30, which is great. But now we want to head over here to the mountain village, because you might remember we talked to the final frog at the gecko fight in the midpoint of that dungeon, so let's finish off this side quest. Well, if it isn't the Great Dongero. The conducting was spectacular, and all of our members rose to the occasion. This is how deeply we were moved by your spectacular conducting. And we get a piece of heart, which I believe is the final item we need to get in Snowhead, period. We're more or less cleaned up for 3 of the areas, barring some occasional stragglers. Most of the items left in the game are either in Clocktown, connected to several side quests in there, or in the distance in Ikana Canyon, which we still have a lot to do there. Speaking of which, let's head over to Ikana Graveyard and check out what's beneath the grave on night 1. I know I'm doing a lot of jump cutting, but this is the point in the game where we're starting to get very familiar with everything, so doing more and more jump cutting just makes more and more sense. For the most part, it's usually just I play the Song of Soaring and get as close as I can as soon as I can. This is actually one of the more annoying instances in the game, if only because you actively have to like ride your horse back over here since we don't have an owl statue this way yet. Nor do we have the map. In fact, I can't remember if they actually move where Tingle is in the 3DS release. I don't think they do for Ikana, but it's probably where they should have. He should be either in like Ikana Canyon or not too far from where Shiro was here in the N64 version. So, beneath the grave on the first night, we have a little bit of a small little mini dungeon area where we have a lot of bats we can take out. These are called bad bats, by the way, the laziest Zelda name I can think of. We have to light up the 3 torches in here before they all go out. Pretty straightforward, but if you're trying to get some money still together for the 5,000 rupees, killing all these bats is worth it because you get a free 50 rupee chest for doing so. Although it feels like there's like twice as many bats in the room as there initially appears to be. And also, something that's kind of fun and keep your eyes out for. Obviously the door is barred right now. The same barring that usually happens when there's a locked room in dungeons. Keep your eyes out for above the door as soon as I light up the 3rd torch. And you can see the bars clip through the ceiling above it. Because it's one of the few times there's a door with a platform immediately above it. For now, though, we have another Iron Knuckle to take out, and this one will be even easier, because not only am I a smaller target, but I have double defense, and my attack strength is maxed out now. Spin attacks are pretty effective against Iron Knuckles, only because they don't really have many counters to it in terms of, like, distance. And there we go.
The curtain rises. Are you the one who freed my soul? I serve the Ikana royal family. I am the composer called Flat. The songs connected to the royal family that remain here were all composed by my brother and I. Oh, Sharp, my dear brother. He sold his soul to the devil and was the one who locked me in here. You who do not fear the dead, learn well the song that is inscribed behind me. And if you ever meet my brother, I'd like you to inform him. The 1,000 years of raindrops summoned by my song are my tears. The thunder that strikes the earth is my anger. I have made my request. Nice little retooling of the composers from Kakariko Graveyard. And now it's time to get the fan favorite. 1,000 years of raindrops summoned by my song are my tears. The thunder that strikes the earth is my anger. Here is written the song that shall cleanse his cursed black soul. Keep this song in your heart. You remembered the Song of Storms. This melody that you've heard before is the turbulent tune that blows curses away. And they're pretty literal in that. You can use this to completely wipe away any curses that you get hit with by a bubble. On top of that, you can also use the rain to make magic beans grow, if memory serves. Not that there's many opportunities to use that, but you can. But with that, I'm gonna need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 22, now that we have the Song of Storms and the Ice Arrows and many other things, we're gonna do a few more brief things throughout Termina before heading on into deeper Ikana Canyon. See you guys then.